Hi, I'm Jack Howell. Did you ever have an awkward passage that had to go really fast and you found yourself at the limit of what your fingers were able to do? Where no matter how much you practiced it, you still weren't completely confident at tempo? I've been working on this lick at the very end of Mahler 5 because I've always found it awkward. It goes very fast and it's going on tour in a couple of weeks. And in the course of working on it, I thought perhaps explaining what I'm doing might be helpful to somebody. Now, this may not seem like an awkward passage to many of you, but for me it is. It's one of those licks where a combination of things, the speed, the unusual pattern, where it is in the concert, the adrenaline, it makes it hard to land in real time. And because I'm not a super fast player, I often have to use all the speed I have, and this is one of those times. So in the past, no matter how fast I feel I've worked it up and feel confident, in concerts I sometimes have felt like I was just hanging on, and I don't like that. I really want to nail it. I want a margin for error. When you're on tour, you can't count on feeling 100% every night. Maybe you've never experienced technical difficulties yourself, but let's say you have a friend who has a technical problem. Let's assume that this is not a motivational issue, that your friend has spent hours on the problem passage and he's hit a wall where it just won't go any faster. Or if it goes faster, it's not clean and 1 out of every 5 times there's a yard sale. The concert is next week and your friend is discouraged, frustrated, and apprehensive. The important thing is, don't panic. Focus on the process, forget the outcome. Examine, evaluate, improve the process, devote as much energy as possible to the process. Whatever the outcome happens to be, freaking out about it now will not make it better. Unless you're one of those geniuses double-tonguing Paganini caprices, there will be something that you have to play that's on the ragged edge. And the strategies that follow, applied to your own more difficult passage, may be helpful. Now, most of the time I'm not talking about speed. Most of the time I'm preaching that if you prioritize beauty, speed will come. However, if you prioritize speed over beauty, you'll just wind up with fast garbage. Especially for auditions, if you play something clearly and beautifully and fast enough, you preserve the illusion of infinite speed. However, when you play in an orchestra, you don't get to choose the tempi. Sometimes you have to find ways to do things that you couldn't do last week. So here are some of my strategies for increasing speed beyond my current comfort zone. Something students often hear me say is, let's throw another rope on that. It's a reference to Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift, a tremendously important piece of literature, the first political satirical novel, which is no longer taught. Leaving aside the implications of that, the shipwrecked Gulliver finds himself washed up on the shores of a strange land where everything is in miniature. Finding no inhabitants of the tiny houses and exhausted, Gulliver falls asleep in a field. When he awakes, he's completely immobilized. While he slept, the Lilliputians have staked him down with ropes, none of them thicker than a thread, but so numerous that Gulliver cannot move a finger. So practice is good, thinking is good, but if you only practice or think about something one way, you only have one rope on it. What if that rope breaks? Or what if that rope wasn't all that strong to begin with? The TV golf teacher Martin Smith says, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting. So I'll take you through my strategies for speed more or less in order according to the size of the giant. The first strategy is analysis and relation to fundamental technique. Wait, you say, what? Before repetition? Before you just practice it a lot? Yes, absolutely. Your imagination is your most powerful tool. Eddie Daniels once told me, if you can imagine it, you can do it. Students have a tendency to fire the missile and then aim it, to start playing without a clear concept and wind up ingraining mistakes or bad habits in a passage, which take far more effort to correct than it would have taken to learn the thing correctly in the first place. One of my maxims is that it is irrational to expect any passage to be better than one's mastery of the underlying fundamental technique. Also, speed is the result of precision, relaxation, and confidence. If a 16th note passage is based on a G major scale and the tempo is 120, if you can play G major scale at 120, you're confident. You probably don't even need to practice the passage. On the other hand, if you can't, it makes sense to practice and perfect the scale, or whatever the fundamental technique is, at the required tempo, then return to the passage. Sometimes seemingly difficult passages on examination reveal themselves to be standard harmony, just with a twist. If you can figure out the harmony and the twist, sometimes the problem can be solved just with a realization. You go, hey, that's just G major, no problem. There, you used your imagination, you found a musical solution to a technical problem. In this case, the troublesome lick is a rising, broken F major scale, down a third, up a fourth. It's a pretty jagged pattern. I actually can't think of another piece that uses it. However, it's the same notes as a rising scale in thirds, starting on the 7th, just with each interval reversed. If we started on a low E and played an F major scale in thirds, up a third, down a second, that would be technique that we've played 1,000 times, and we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. But there's that twist. So for some players, with this lick, that might be all it takes. Play a rising scale in thirds backwards and Bob's your uncle. You're welcome. Please like and subscribe. I'm sorry to say that's not enough for me. At a lower speed it might be, but at this tempo the slightest hesitation and I'm down. So let's throw another rope on it. The next strategy, which is still somewhat low-hanging fruit, is to be sure you've optimized your fingering choices and hand position. Sometimes extreme speeds call for fingerings that would be unacceptable at slower tempi, or simply not obvious. Sometimes a habitual hand position creates a you can't get there from here situation at the required tempo, particularly a case with the index finger like I'm going to talk about later. In this Mahler lick, at normal tempo, or at a slower tempo, I would play both the low E and the F on the right. That keeps as many notes as possible on one hand. But at 90 to the bar, it's basically just twitch speed. So one note per pinky works better. Also for me in this passage, it's crucial that I get my right hand down for the C on the B flat. Not only does that get me across the break faster, it gives me a grip on the last 4 notes. When I grab that B flat with the C down, I know I'm home. The really crucial thing for me is the left index finger, which must not drift. I need to feel the throat A key on the first knuckle when I play the E below, so that I will be ready with a long forefinger for the C following the throat B flat. I talk at length about the left index finger in my video Wisdom of Robert Marcellus. Generally, we always want our fingers to be in position for the next note or notes, never in a position of having to leap across a gap. And if you want more of this, the Bulletproof Peter and the Wolf video has it. Obviously, every passage, every player is different, but the idea is not to repeat a passage 100 times, then realize that there's a better fingering or hand position. Our final strategy that I would classify as low-hanging fruit is to think about musical direction, another application of McGill's finding a musical solution to a technical problem. When something goes really fast, a common instinct is to think about how fast we have to play, and then try and react to the start, and then play that fast. This creates tension, and sometimes we actually wind up playing faster than we intended. But even if that doesn't happen, a tense muscle is a slow muscle. So I suggest that instead of doing that, you think about where you must arrive, relax, and feel the music flowing to that point. In this passage, I feel the downbeat of each bar as an arrival, and every other note as part of a pickup. Obviously, I feel it in 1. If I arrive late to that first register C, it's all over. There's no time to recover. and feeling emphasis, or worse, taking a breath on the downbeat before the G will ensure that I'm late. So I relax, I aim for the C. When I land on the C, I feel the direction from the low A to the G, and then the direction from the E to the D flat. I'll refer to these groups later, but basically I'm thinking, so I talked about this thinking of arrival rather than speed in the Ravel Piano Concerto video. Sorry to talk about all the videos, but I've kind of talked about most of this stuff in other contexts. So it applies to lots of technical pieces, like Daphnis and Chloe, which we're also playing this year, so I'll probably make a video about that at some point. And it's the same instinct that we use to hit a moving ball. So that's our low-hanging fruit. We've related to fundamentals, we've made sure that our fingerings can't be approved, and we've thought about musical direction. Now, if we still need more speed, it can't be avoided. We've got to practice. In practicing, repetition is our first line of defense. Sometimes you just play something enough times and you've got it. We should keep in mind Avram Galper's advice that the faster you want to play, the slower you must practice. Slow, perfect practice is never time wasted. And as Galper says, practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Now, if you've followed my logic up to this point, you can see that we now know exactly what and how to practice slowly and carefully. And if you've never done this, the repetition in this spirit may be all that you need to conquer that difficult passage. Sometimes, though, mere repetition digs a rut, and it reinforces what past experience has proven that we can or can't do. And what we need to do is get out of the rut and push past what we have done up to now. Speed comes from precision, relaxation, confidence. You play fast when you know you can play fast. One of the most powerful basic repetition practice techniques I've found is half speed, full speed, which is just what it says on the tin. You set the metronome at a fast speed, maybe your desired final speed or close to it, and then you play the lick at half speed, then you play it at full speed. And you go back and forth. You don't allow yourself to play it fast twice in a row. And if you just do that, there's a really good chance that'll just work, because it really helps a lot. But there's more to it than just playing slowly. So you remember Martin Smith's advice: if you keep doing what you've been doing. The goal at half tempo is to be exaggeratedly perfect and to always be thinking and feeling. And there are many different things that deserve your attention. Maybe you think about airstream placement. Maybe it's hand position. Maybe it's that feeling of upbeat rhythm. Maybe it's preparing a bulky interval, or it's just feeling a really warm, oily relaxation in your hands. Maybe it's feeling your finger pads perfectly sealing the tone holes. One of the things I think about when I'm playing slowly is that long, fluid pickup to each bar line that I talked about earlier. Whatever, half speed is when you have time to think. At full speed, you imagine, you relax, you send it. Now, when I say full speed, it may be that your current top speed is not where your target tempo is. That's fine. I still think that this half-speed, full-speed approach ratchets you up faster. If you give it full mental energy, ratchets you up faster than simply starting slow and building by increments. Important thing is to avoid practicing mistakes. Mistakes cost us confidence, and confidence is essential for speed. So after all of that, your top speed still isn't fast enough. Time to break things down further. There's a school of thought that says you should never practice technique slowly. You should always practice full speed. But what you do is you choose short sections that you can play easily. So you perfect short, easy sections, then link them together. My friend Alberto Armarza calls this building an easy train. It's a valid technique, and there's some neuroscience behind it, but there are caveats. If your technique isn't perfect, overspeeding it will only magnify flaws. And if you need to slow it down, it doesn't go as fast as you thought it did, your technique is apt to be uneven. Like interval training for athletes, you can increase speed by maintaining for a short time intensity that currently is impossible for a long time. Done properly, you can practice clarity, relaxation, and speed at the same time. However, done improperly, you can ingrain tension and the habit of making hand gestures that include most of the notes instead of discrete finger motions. That's not what we want. Assuming that you're doing right, I suggest that for your bursts, you pick a tempo faster than your target speed and then slow it down to your target speed to play the full passage. Finally, just as we earlier thought of direction in increments of 1 bar, I think the bars of the easy train should always be pickups. That's just my opinion, but I think we always want to be thinking in terms of destinations, not departures. If you need more speed, well, be creative. Meditate, really imagine yourself playing fast. Like Eddie said, if you can imagine it, you can do it. Now, this Mahler lick has to go at least 80, maybe 90 to the bar. So I've been playing my scales in warm-up at that tempo to just kind of live there and start, feel comfortable, like training at altitude. Maybe try different note groupings for your easy train. Try shorter groups, try longer groups. Relax as much as possible. Maybe practice the groups in a different meter. You play triplets instead of fours or vice versa, whatever your lick is. Now that bit right there may seem pretty close to the technique of creating different rhythmic patterns for practice, playing a super dotted rhythm, then reversing it. Bum, ba-dum, ba-da, 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 ba-da. As I've said before, I'm not generally in favor of this. I think that if you practice even finger motion and correct hand position, you shouldn't need to introduce unevenness to correct unevenness. While it can work, it's treating a symptom rather than curing the disease. That said, if you're desperate and it works, it works. Any port in a storm, a quick fix is still a fix. That's about all my advice. Remember, focus on the process, not the outcome. Perhaps you haven't actually exhausted the possibilities of repetition. If you have time, be patient. Set yourself a daily period of time, say half an hour, and work on the lick with no interruptions, then put it down for the day. Or find the opportunity to practice it for 10 minutes several times a day. Or put on a movie and just run the lick over and over. That's assuming that you're playing it perfectly. I know I always say that mere repetition is corrosive, but sometimes you've just got to lay down the myelin. Remember, myelin doesn't care if it's good or not. Probably a good idea to re-emphasize the advice to relax. Relax, relax, relax. Obviously, we're not totally relaxed when we play, but we have to avoid extra tension because, particularly when you're doing something repetitive that's very fast like this, that's where tendonitis lives. So be careful. In the end, you are the captain of your ship and you have to find what works for you. But I hope I've given you some ideas. Go get 'em.